Hi, students. I welcome you to today's English class. In today's session, we will begin with the fourth unit Everything I Need to Know I Learned in the Forest. This is neither a poem nor a lesson, but it's an article, an essay written by Vandana Shiva. She wrote this article for the issue titled What Would Nature Do? So, this article was written under the title What Would Nature Do? And it was originally published in the winter 2012 uh, Yes magazine. So this article is published in winter 2012 Yes magazine initially, and she wrote this article Everything I Need to Know I Learned in the Forest under the title What Would Nature Do? So Vandana Shiva is an internationally renowned activist for biodiversity and against cooperative globalization. She is an Indian scholar, environmental activist, anti globalization author. Currently based in Delhi, she has authored more than 20 books. She was born on 5th November 1952 in Dehradun. She's around 67 years. She's an Indian. She's done her PhD in philosophy. She has won a lot of awards such as Right Livelihood Award, Sydney Peace Prize, Thomas Merton Award. And this entire essay is divided into various elements which talks about the forest and what Vandana Shiva learned from her ecological journey. So I've divided the essay into eight important elements, starting with her family background. Then she goes to her ecological growth. Now, ecology is a Greek word which means house of environment, study of relationship between air, water, animals, plants, etc. It deals with the interaction between organisms and their environment. So, we will learn more about ecological growth in the second element. Thirdly, she tells us the lessons which he learned from the Chipko movement. So you must have heard about this movement called as Chipko movement, which is a non-violent movement which started in 1973. So Chipko movement is a non-violent movement which started in the year 1973. In this movement, they responded to a large scale deforestation that was taking place in the Himalayan region. They aimed in protecting and conserving the trees for the cause of preserving the forest. The name of the movement Chipko comes from the word embrace, as the villagers hugged the trees and encircled them to prevent them from being cut or from being hacked. So, in the fourth element, she talks about monoculture. To go beyond monoculture, monoculture is to grow one single crop in one piece of land. So, she says we need to change that and go beyond monoculture. In the fifth element, she focuses on rights of nature on the global stage. And then in the sixth element, she says that we shouldn't see the earth as a dead earth worldview, and in the seventh element, she educates us about what nature teaches us. And finally, she concludes her article by talking about the poetry of the forest. So, first, we will learn about her family background. So, Vandana Shiva says that her ecological journey started from the Himalayan. So, ecological here is study of environment, relationship between living organisms and their environment. So, her ecological journey starts from the forest of the Himalaya. Her father was a forest conservator, meaning a forest officer. Her mother became a farmer after the partition of India and Pakistan. And she says it is from the Himalayan forest where she learned a lot about the ecosystem and she knows most about the ecology. So the songs and poems which her mother composed was about trees, forest, and and India's forest civilization. So here we can see that from her childhood itself, she's got high influence about the environment in her life. And secondly, she tells us in the second element how her ecological journey started. So, her involvement in the contemporary ecology movement began with the Chipko. Chipko, as I told you earlier, is a non violent response to a large scale deforestation that was taking place in the Himalayan region. So, she got involved into this ecological movement by first participating in the Chipko movement. So in 1970s, peasant women from her region in the Garhwal Himalayas came out in defense, in protection of the forest. So who are these peasant women? Peasant women are women who are small holders, who owns or who rents a small piece of land to grow crops. These are called as peasant women. So they came out of the region of the Garhwal Himalayas to protect their forest. Why? Because the logging had led into landslides, floods, scarcity of water, fodder, and fuel. Since women provided the basic necessities to their family, the scarcity of this meant longer walks for collecting water and firewood and heavier burden. So, women knew that the real value of forest was not timber from a dead tree, was not to make profits from a dead tree, but it gave spring and streams food for them and for their cattle's fuel for their hearts. This is the importance of forest in their lives. So women declared that they would go hug the trees. As you can see here in the picture, all the women are encircled around the trees, and they declared to the loggers that if they have to cut the tree, first they have to kill them. This is how they went and protested against the loggers. And they sang a folk song of that period. Folk song is a song originating among the people of a country or area, which is passed orally or traditionally from one generation to the next generation. So they sang a folk song which says, "These beautiful oaks and rhododendrons, they give us cool water. Don't cut these trees. We have to keep them alive." So they knew that keeping the trees alive was very, very important, not just to make profits, not just to make money, but they knew that it would bring streams and springs and food for them, fuel for their hearts, as well as food for their cattle. In 1973, Vandana Shiva decided to leave India and uh, go to Canada to do her higher studies, that is, PhD in philosophy. So, before she could leave India, she wanted to visit her favorite forest and swim in her favorite stream. So, when she went after looking for her favorite forest and favorite stream, for her surprise, she realized that the forests were gone and the stream was reduced to a trickle. Trickle is a small flow of liquid in a small stream. So it's a very tiny little flow of liquid, and there were no water left where she could go and swim like she used to in her childhood days. After seeing such a sad scene of the forest and the stream, she decided to become a volunteer for the Chipko movement, and she started documenting the forestation. And she used to spend her vacation doing padayatras, walking on pilgrimages. She used to actively spread the message of Chipko. She got herself involved in documenting the deforestation and the work of the forest activities, and she spread the message of Chipkos. She also involved in Padayatras. So one of the dramatic Chipko action which really impressed her took place in the year 1977 in the village called as Adwani, which is in Himalaya. So, in the Himalayan village of Advani in 1977, a village woman named Bachni Devi led resistance against her own husband. So, it so happened that in this year, 1977, there was a family where a woman named Bachni Devi, she went against her own husband who had obtained a contract to cut trees with the forest officers. So when the forest officers and the officials arrived at the forest, the women here held a lighted lantern, although it was a broad daylight. So holding this lighted lantern, although it was a broad daylight, indicates that she is trying to enlighten the mind of this forest officer and her husband, who believes that cutting down of trees and selling them would only give profit, and she wanted to enlighten them that forest gives much more than just money, and it is our responsibility that we have to save the forest and not cut the trees like this. So, holding a broad lantern on a broad daylight, a lighted lantern, although it was a broad daylight, indicates that she's trying to enlighten the dark mindset of this forest officer and as well as her husband. So, the forest officer asked the women to explain uh, why she is come here with the lighted lantern. So here she says that I have come to teach you forestry. So here the forest officer gets really angry with her, and he replies by telling, you foolish women, how can you prevent trees, how can you teach me the value of forest? Do you know what forest bears? So he says forest produces profit, resin, and timber. So, resin here is a sticky, flammable organic substance, and timber, timber, the wood prepared for use in carpentry and to build a lot of buildings and woodworks. So here the forest officer says that you don't know anything about the forest or the value of forest. Forest gives us a lot of profit. It gives us resin, and it also gives timber. So the women sings back in chorus and says that what do forests bear? It bears soil, water, and pure air. She again repeats and says soil, water, and pure air sustain the earth and all she bears, meaning strengthen or help or support the earth and everything which the earth bears, rather than destroying and cutting it off. So, with this, we conclude the first as well as the second element. The first element we spoke about her family, and the second element here we spoke about her ecological growth, where she talks about Chipko movement, how Chipko movement was her first start to ecological journey, and then she talks about the peasant women from the region of Garhwal in 1970s. Then she also tells about the folk song which all the women sang to save the forest. And finally, in 1973, when she had to leave India to go to Canada for higher studies, she witnesses that her forest, which she used to go and play in her childhood, has disappeared. That led her to become a volunteer of Chipko movement, and she spent every vacation doing these padayatras, documenting the deforestation, spreading the message of Chipko, and the action of Bachni Devi and her response towards this officer also had a great impact in the heart of Vandana Shiva. So, with this, we conclude this second element.